We want to thank Karen Garcia for being here today to do the presentation on city government. And also, just like to thank you for your leadership and your participation. It really takes something to run for office, and so we really appreciate your putting your name in for mayor recently, and also for stepping up and running for the position that's available right now. I just want to really honor and acknowledge you for that, Karen, so thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
And thank you for presenting to us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. And you've heard it said that no man is an island. And anybody that runs for a position, whether it's school board, city board, the county government, we don't do it alone. And a lot of people at this table have helped me and helped others to be elected. And when Ann's driven me when I ran for a state office, drove in parades, and she knows what it's like to work on a statewide campaign. But today we're going to talk about city government. And I have some handouts, and we'll just go ahead and distribute these as we discuss city government. City government is politics at the grassroots. And in Arkansas, the majority of the city governments are the strong mayor form of government. We have over 500 cities in the state of Arkansas, but most of them are smaller. Across the country, the major form of government is the city manager form of government, which is what we have in Hot Springs. There are only 8 incorporated towns and cities that don't use the traditional mayor-council form of government in Arkansas. But most of those have populations of less than 500. So we're talking incorporated cities. I grew up in Friendship, Arkansas, and it's a 1-mile city, and but it's an incorporated city within that 1 mile. And they got, in fact, my first position was city clerk in Friendship. When I was in college, I also was city clerk, which is just part-time. But the big accomplishment was, even though it's a rural area, we did not have any park or area. And we applied, and I administered the grant for a city park. And now then, I have grandchildren that's had birthday parties there. They can go in the afternoons and play on the playground equipment. There's a ball field. They practice, and my grandchildren have played t-ball and practiced playing there. And they have an annual get-together, because, you know, when you've got 200 people, you can all get together. And they have their festival there. So even though you're a small city, you can still do things to help provide services that are needed in small communities that often get overlooked. But with the city manager form of government, the mayor is not what is in the typical city strong mayor government. They don't have any veto power. The mayor is as any other member of the board with 1 vote. They can't veto any votes. But they preside over the business meeting. So at City Hall in the boardroom, it would be a horseshoe like this for the city board of directors, and the mayor is in the center and presides over the meeting, but cannot make any motions and cannot second a motion. Can ask for a motion, but if none comes, that business, you have to move on. So in some respects, during business meetings of the city, the board members can have more say in what business comes up than the mayor does, because they can't bring up unless a board member moves for that piece of business and a second and the majority agrees. The city manager form of government in Hot Springs, we have 7 board members, including the mayor. The mayor is elected at large. That means that everyone in the city votes for the position of mayor. The other 6 directors are elected by their district. And the districts are within the city limits, and every 10 years after the census, the populations are reviewed, and each district was try to have the same population in each district. So that's why sometimes the lines have to be moved so that we try to maintain. And in the past census, the population has been increasing. It increased in I'm in District 5, which is includes Oaklawn and goes to the lake and goes all the way over to Malvern Avenue and up to Indiandale. So it's South Hot Springs, but it's got a chunk in the middle. And back in the 70s, we had all of the directors were elected at large. And there was a lawsuit that came about that was won, and we made changes in the elections for city government in Hot Springs, and we had to have a majority-minority district. And so then we put each director into the 6 districts, and one of those has to be a majority-minority district. That is currently held that's District 2, and it's held by Lane Jones. Now, since then till now, in the last census, when they went through the redistricting, it is more difficult than in the 70s to get a majority-minority district, because at that time in District 2, the majority of African Americans were more concentrated. This was right after integration in the schools here, and there was some racial tensions and problems at that time. Now then, we're more across the board. I mean, minorities are not so concentrated. So when they do the redistricting, it's still a law to have majority-minority. And to do that, that was, this last time required the population of Hispanics and African Americans. And they have to draw District 2 first, because that really causes the gerrymandering now. Because that district has to be drawn, it's an unusual shape, but it's to meet the requirement to have a majority-minority district. So now, some of my district that I had when I was elected in 2010 went to District 2. And District 2, you know, you would think 2 and 5 border, but 2 borders every district, because the way it has to be drawn. Well, and we've been losing population in District 1, which is the north part, and up Parket Avenue out to Belvedere. And it had been circling back around, and it would border District 6 and 2 on that side, because it goes way to the eastern border and then back around, because they had lost so much population to keep the population even. So that's why you see some that are big geographic area, but it's because of the population. I suspect we'll see some change in that because we have been having some renewal in District 1. There's a lot of improvements that's going on Park Avenue and in that area. And we've had people buying homes there and renovating them. And I suspect we'll see some population in the next census coming back to District 1. District 6 has a lot of population, and that is from Red Oak, all the way in the city limits through Carpenter Dam, and then it goes Lakeside School and beyond in the housing residential areas on that side from the country club going east. So their geographic area, other than going out to Red Oak, is more concentrated than some of the others. District 3 has the Pawpaw District, and it goes down to the western border on the north side of the railroad tracks, and then District 4 is on the south side of the railroad tracks. And some of my district went to District 4, also part of the area from Oaklawn Street and that area over there by Oaklawn School. Woodlawn that I had went over to District 4, and mine is comes down Higdon Ferry and the Emory just to the high school. And then at the time the census occurred, Twin Points, all of that's been annexed into the city now, but mine only went to where the city limits ended. When that was annexed in, it went into 4. So from Pinta Street intersection to Twin Points to the lake is now in 4. But again, after the 2020 census, that some of these borders may change. We will have to see. The city of Hot Springs is considered a first-class city. If you've ever seen these where it talks about first-class city, a second-class city, incorporated, that is based on population. The smaller, like we said, a lot of these incorporated cities are only 500 or so people. They are incorporated towns. So that's why a lot of them, they can't afford a city manager. The city manager form of government has become a lot more complex. We've had over the years a lot of unfunded mandates that have come down from federal or state governments, and the working with having a part-time mayor that is doing something else to make a living, or that some of them may be retired in some of these smaller areas. They don't have the expertise to know how to go about administering some of these regulations that are now in cities, and especially the size of the larger cities. Hot Springs is now the 11th largest city in Arkansas. And so you can see across the state, even though we've been about the same population, that we're still one of the larger cities with over 500 cities in the state, and we're number 11. And that's because we have so many of these small ones. But we have a large population here of second homeowners, summer homeowners. We have an influx of tourists that people come and stay here during the race meet. They'll rent condos or homes, stay here or have a second home here. We have a lot of weekenders. There's a lot of people from Pine Bluff. I meet so many people from Pine Bluff that are here on the weekend, and then they're going to move here when they retire. So we do get a lot of retirees, but we have an infrastructure that's much greater than just our city population because of this influx of people. Our population doubles on Derby Day just at the racetrack, you know. So, and the racetrack is one of our biggest statistics show drivers of people coming into Hot Springs. The National Park in Bathhouse Road, National Park downtown, and Oaklawn are the two largest draws for the tourists that come into Hot Springs. And they bring in the revenue, the sales tax revenues, and they're spending money, and that's what helps our tax base, because we're dependent on that sales tax to run the city government. And also the breakage that we get from Oaklawn, we get from the live race meet, but now that they have games of skill or that we get money from that, and that's been a steady rise in income since that's been implemented at Oaklawn. So they do contribute to the city government coffers significantly. First-class cities are those of 2,500 or more people, and some of them do have a strong mayor, with it a mayor's elected. But the largest cities, Little Rock is our largest city, and they have a hybrid because now they have a strong mayor, but they have the city manager too. But they've long been a city manager form of government. But several, 9 or 10 years ago now, they passed the people voted to make the mayor a strong mayor. So they've got they've got the mayor and the city manager, and they divide the duties. But most of the administration, the city manager takes care of. Also, the Fort Smith has a city administrator, which it's a little different. The difference is in the ordinances, the state ordinances, it's a little different wording, but the city administrator and city manager are very much the same. And you can have a strong mayor and a city administrator, and they take care of all that, but the mayor, all the business of running the city, but you can give the mayor veto power, which in our city manager form, the city board only has 2 employees, the city manager and the city attorney, and they are employees of the city. All of the other 600 employees of the city work for underneath the city manager. So the city board cannot fire or hire the manager of sanitation or the water department. The city manager does all of that, and the board sets the policies and directions, but they have no other responsibilities, nor they're not to interfere with the other employees other than the city manager and the city attorney. If there's issues, that's addressed with the city manager. And the rest of the board is not to be involved with any of the employee issues. Did you have a question?
What is the advantage between the two versus mayor being the power versus the city manager?
Most of the time, it's with the complexities of the government now. The city manager is trained for that. They have a degree in city administration and public policies. There are several schools that offer those type degrees, but they are schooled just to be a city manager. Outside of Arkansas, most of the city governments across the country are city manager forms of government. In Arkansas, we have 500 cities, but only 8 have city manager or city administrator type of government. And it just hasn't, we have so many little, like I said, out of 500 cities, we have a lot that are only 500, and they're less than 2,500 people. I mean, DeQueen, you know, it's a little city, but they have less than 2,500.
Well, I imagine it takes the politics out of hiring the individual people too. You're not going to get to hire your brother-in-law
Right.
to do the trash collecting or whatever.
Well,
So-
that's what happened here. When we went to a city form of government in Hot Springs, it was in the 80s, the latter part of the 80s. And Jim Randall was the last strong mayor in the old form of government, the city manager form of government we had. But when he ran for mayor, there were 8 people ran. He ran to be the last mayor. He was part of the organization in Hot Springs to change the form of government. So he ran wanting to be the last one, and that was part of his platform, and he was the last one. We've had some, you can try to, with petition and the right number of signatures, you can petition to have an election for the people to vote to change the form of government. That's what happened in the late 80s when we changed to this form. There's been other times, several times over the years that people have tried to change it back. But it's the last time this happened was in 2013, I believe, and 93% of the vote said we want the city manager form of government.
Karen, I have a question, and perhaps you don't want to answer this. I don't know. If you don't want to, that's all right. We moved here shortly after the city manager form of government was installed in 1989. It was installed before that, but we came soon after. I remember that the people who had been running the city before that time had extended some of the sewer and water lines way outside the city. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have the problems that we're having today with the county.
Right.
It's because these people did this, as I understood it at the time, to bring water and sewer to their own subdivisions, which were outside the city limits. And so I think that's one reason why it's a nice thing that we have a city manager form of government, because I don't think that could happen anymore. And the water and sewer at that time was a semi-autonomous
Yeah. We had a water board.
And that was not controlled by the city board. So eventually, that got brought under the city board. I think it probably cost Melinda Barron her job as mayor. But anyway, it was all very interesting to a newcomer, all that stuff that was going on there. And I think, I think you guys are doing a pretty good job of trying to recover from that serious expensive mistake that was made in the 80s.
So Hot Springs has a long history of corruption in city government. Going back, I've got a copy at the end about Leo McLaughlin. He was a mayor. He ran the city. He took money. He took bribes. He was involved in all types of things, and he was
So was the judge.
judge. I mean,
This was long after he was gone.
yeah, this was after that, but I mean, it just kind of carried forward. We had open gambling, even though gambling was illegal in Arkansas. We had casinos and open gambling all downtown, and everyone turned, as long as you got your payoff, everybody turned their back to it and swept it under the carpet until Governor Rockefeller was, until he was elected. He sent the state police over here and they shut it down. But it was illegal, but some people made a lot of money off of it. But we had this Most cities, in fact, Hot Springs is the only city that extends water and sewer beyond their city limits. Most cities have required you to be in the city limits to receive that service. So we and back at the 80s, we and Conway were about the same size. Conway's grown a lot more because they did not extend those services until those parts of the county came into the city limits. And you can, I mean, if you've been to Conway, you can see how much growth they've had, the type growth they've had in industry they've had come in. We had people that when you are in something for self-serving versus serving the people and the community, you have different results and consequences. We had people that were builders and developers that were running this water board and the city board, and it was for their best interest, not necessarily the city's best interest, to extend water and sewer to where they had property to build. And they profited from it, but the city we've had huge cost associated with that. And when they're building outside the city, there's also not a inspection, and there's not codes to make sure things are being built right. And I think you can attest to the home you bought outside the city limits.
Very much so.
And how they built her home, some things they did would not have happened in the city limits because, well,
There were no checks and balances at all.
and she had to put in extra money to
Lots.
fix the problem that she didn't know existed when she bought it. And a lot of people that move here from out of state don't realize that they aren't meeting any type of code or building inspections as they're being built outside the city limits. We have found homes where they put old water heaters for their septic system, and even by the lake where it was infiltrating waste into lake water that our becomes our drinking water. So, having, this is for our safety and protection. It's not to put undue regulations, but most of all these are for our own safety. And that's why, I chose to live in this city because I don't want to have to worry about those type of things. Yes, ma'am.
Well, what I was thinking about, the whole thing about city government, and I got a degree in urban planning, and it's the public health, welfare, and safety. And it's those three things that guide city government, so that it's not self-serving, but it's for the public safety and welfare. So.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there no, and I was shocked too, I live in the county, and I was shocked at the lack of regulations. Whenever we had work done, I'd say, are we going to get a building permit? And no, we don't need no stinking building. But we don't have any state oversight. I moved here from Florida, which had Miami, had a lot of oversight, a lot of codes, and a lot of corruption. But there's no state oversight of any.
There's state regulations, but unless they're called in, there's not a regular oversight and inspections like the city has. Because in the city, you have to have a building permit. And there is a department that oversees that. So they're going to be doing checks and reviews during the construction period. And they will let the builder know if something is not up to code. And it'll have to be repaired before they continue to build.
I think that in the county you have a sewer inspection now.
I really don't know.
I mean, when we built our house, the first house out in the county, I think we did have to have the sewer
I believe-
inspector.
I believe-
That may have been from the state,
I believe you have to have a health department inspection and get a permit on that before you can put
What
in
I
a
was going
septic
to
system.
say is,
and a
I've been
well.
in real estate in Colorado Springs, and so when we moved here, we found a good builder, but we also read into the contract that he built it according to the FHA, which is very basic code. But the house was well built, but it was because we knew enough to write that into our contract, and we had a book that had that stuff in it. So it can be done, but not everyone knows to do it.
but it is important for our public safety. And we have it extended all the way out to Royal, which is, I mean, we go from Montgomery County line to the Hot Spring County line on providing water and sewer services. And the city's been under an administrative consent order for the past several years and spending millions of dollars to bring everything up to code. And I know you hear the most about the water and the dispute between the city and county. But I had a big concern about that this consent order is on sanitation. So the sewer system was in much worse shape because as they've added on, a line might be going by your house, but as they've added more and more homes, if there was a little pipe there and they keep adding more and more and you got that much more sewer, it doesn't mean it can handle the flow of sewage. And that's what has happened. We have had raw sewage on like we've had a lot of rain and you get that flooding, and over by McLeod Street has been
It goes by my house on the lake.
that's one of the worst areas, and that's been being worked on.
And thank you for getting that done. I know it was when you.
Yeah, we had to
you started.
issue the bonds, but we're in fact, the city paid a fine. It could have been a lot worse, but they had to pay a fine to get all this under, and sign this consent order, and they're under the review of the state and the feds to make sure all of this gets done. So it's still, because it takes millions and millions of dollars to put this infrastructure in place. But there are areas that there's still lines that may go by, a house. But, just like on Marion Anderson, look how much building has gone on. When they add another subdivision, it doesn't mean that that pipe can handle all of the additional flow just because it goes by your house. And particularly on the sewer. I mean, just to get what the city's responsible for now on the sewage side is a huge undertaking, and that really has to be watched as the growth continues, because there needs to be a lot more infrastructure in place for the sewage, not just water. I think with the allocation of the water, we'll have the water supply, but we've got to build the new treatment plant. And long-term, there'll probably be another treatment plant in years to come. But one of the things the state and the feds had asked the city to have redundancy, meaning that, like right now at the Ouachita plant, where the intake of the water is, sometimes it's not the dry conditions that causes the problem, it's the storms. When we had these bad storms, you see pictures in the paper if you're not by the lake, where all of the trash, when people's docks were floating off. I mean, but there was a lot of trash. Well, in the intake area where it comes out of the lake for our water, that trash stops up that gets in there, and they have to have more people out there working, trying to get keep those filters from getting stopped up, or if one goes down, then they can't bring as much water in. So even if it's not a dry situation, they've gotten into crisis situation where they were not being able to produce and get the water out there because the equipment wouldn't work with till they got it all cleaned out. And that can take a few days after continuous bad storms. So the engineers and the state said, well, you need to have another intake, and that's what will happen. But we just have the one intake location at this time. So it's more than just dry conditions or droughts that can cause us not to have enough water production or storage.
But I just want to say one more thing. I think it was back in 2012, I was asked to sit on a committee, a citizens committee by the city, to look at the water issue. And this was before it ever got hot. But, I mean, hot in terms of politics. But they were already saying that summer, they'd had some days when they were right up to the top. And if something had happened, we would not have water in the city. I mean, they couldn't. So it was already getting to be an emergency that long ago.
Yeah, 2012 was when it really did surface, because they had talked about taking the lakeside, the little plant, old little plant up on the north end, and because it can only do about 3 of the MGB's measurement of the water production. But like during that time, that was going full force to have enough water.
Yeah.
So they can't decommission that plant until there is another intake source of the plant.
Karen, do you think there's any chance that the water system might change the management ownership structure so that it's, rather than just a city water system, it would be some other type of a cooperative venture with the other incorporated areas in the county, or even something independently managed?
Like a regional water
Yeah,
system.
I'm asking that because we do have these lines. I mean, that's done, that's a done thing, and we're always going to be having this problem. And I'm wondering if it's not just a city operation, but it's something a little bit broader, if we'd be able to get over some of these obstacles.
Well,
I mean, does it?
all
is it likely?
yes, it could be done, if that's what, the complexity is, it's been very expensive, and that's where the city has a lot of money invested, but they've got bonds issued that they have to pay. So it would be it could be done, but it'd be a complicated agreement to work out to convert those assets, and how would the city get the money? Because they'd have to, if they didn't have it and they issued the bonds, they'd have to pay off those bonds. Or they'd have to work out where this new commission took the bonds. I mean, I don't know the legalese of it. And I know there's been discussion of how could that be done, and it can be done. Or there can be one where the city sells it to them. Like I said, I grew up in a rural area, even though Friendship was incorporated. And that was one thing, when I was a little girl, I remember my grandfather out working on was petitioning to get water, because everybody had to depend on wells. And so the city of Malvern sold water, and we had a Hot Spring County Water Association. and they buy water, and then they brought the water to all the rural areas. The city of Malvern didn't, but we formed a water association for the rural areas outside the city, and they brought the water to the area. So it could be done. It would take a lot of cooperation, and but I mean, it's definitely something that there's some people that want to look at it. There's some people that don't, and we just have to bring it to the table and get all the right parties to talk about. But the legal part of it, I don't know. Yes, ma'am.
It just seems as though there's so many towns in Arkansas that are so insular, and that things such as water, such as air, and soil are a little bit more broad-based and encompass a larger area. I know Arkansas, there's regional planning. I don't know, is one based here? I don't even know that.
We have the West Arkansas.
Yeah. But it just seems as though there's not that intergovernmental coordination, or let's get together and try to solve this, because Hot Springs can't handle the water all by itself, even though it has. But still, so many things are based on the commitments and dedication of other communities.
Right. And that's one of the things that is unique about Hot Springs, because, as I said, the other cities didn't take it on unless they were in the city limits. And that's where these water associations were formed, and they put in the infrastructure and bought the water. Now, we've had water districts here, but the agreement with them is that they come into they're part of the city water system. They initiated it. That Ray Owens has worked on several of the water and sewer districts in the county, but they're all the city takes over the maintenance of those. And the way some of those are structured, the front-end cost really didn't encompass the total cost. Mm-hmm. There's a perception that, it's all been paid for, but all of the initial infrastructure really hasn't been.
Well, there's repair costs too, and you have
Yes.
to keep those.
But like I was talking about these pipes, also the pumps. To pump, when you get more flow, there's not enough oomph to pump it to the treatment plants. So they've had, even when we put in the county jail, they had to put in more pump stations because that wouldn't handle the county jail.
Do you think that's based
On
on
that route.
property rights? You know, it's my property, I don't want them doing that. Or do you think that comes into play a lot in the planning or the?
I think that in the past, we didn't have the planning and the view to look long-term. And, I mean, if we look at, it's a city out at Lake Hamilton.
Yeah.
And they want some regulation, but they don't have it, but they're putting in city light that businesses, and they want that type of protection. But in the early days, there wasn't the foresight to say, well, if that's going to grow, but continue to build, really there should be, put it in at this size instead of this size. But there's been so tremendous growth that really you're having to redo you got to replace the whole infrastructure that was there. Because if you've got this much flow and you've got a little pipe there that it doesn't work, it's going to bust out, and that's where you have these overflows. And so, because there's consequences when you're self-serving and not thinking about everybody, you're short-sighted. You don't think about the big picture. You're thinking, I'm going to make this much money off this deal, and I got to have the water go there, and how it can get there, because once they sign and I get my money, they don't care about them.
Is this the form of federal government we have currently?
This is on city government.
Are you talking about federal government?
Yeah, I didn't know, is that federal government we have
Kind
currently?
of strayed off of the
Yeah.
government a little bit.
Yeah, but I wanted to get in today for the city government works. I mentioned we have 7 board members, and one of those is the mayor. And the city board passes all of the ordinances. It's the legislative government for the city of Hot Springs. Now, the school boards and most city boards are nonpartisan. And it doesn't become partisan races until the county elections are, the offices for the county government are partisan. But across Arkansas, the school boards and municipalities are mostly non-partisan. The elections of the 7 board members, we don't elect them all at the same time. In 2018, we have 4 seats that are coming up for election. And that's District 2, District 4, District 5, and the mayor. And then in 2020, District 1, 3, and 6 will be up for election. Now, currently, I am, District 5 is open, and I am one of the people that are looking to take that seat. And I have a packet that I have application. You have to fill out a financial, you have to list all your financial holdings, your income and everything. And this you have to file annually. And we have to have petitions with signatures of city residents. So something you can be involved with today is I have one of the pages of my petition, and if you live in the city limits, I'm asking for your signature, and you first sign your name as you have it on your voter registration and print your name. And I know Ann lives in the city, and I'm going to ask her to sign. And if any of you live in the city limits and would sign my petition, I would really appreciate that. The board meetings are twice a month for the business meetings, and they are the first and third Tuesdays at 7 o'clock at the City Hall. They are televised, and you can live stream them. As a citizen, you can sign up on any of the items to speak for or against or to ask questions at a city board meeting. Also, the city has a number of citizen committees, advisory committees and commissions. And I have a page here that lists different city commissions and committees that you as a citizen of Hot Springs can participate on. I served on the Transportation Advisory Committee for 8 years before I was elected on the city board, and it was I enjoyed it, and I was chair of that committee when I left. It was very informative. I learned a lot, and the Transportation Committee oversees the bus system and makes recommendations to the city board about it and reviews requests for other transportation in the city, like the taxis, the carriage rides, and any type of transportation like that, where they'll ask for permits or they'll ask for a rate increase, and they'll have public hearings about that and make recommendations to the city board. I'm currently on the Airport Advisory Committee, and I really enjoy it. It meets once month on the second Wednesday out at the airport. They've been doing a lot of airport improvements out there. And we lost our air service, and we've just got some air service back. And this month is going to be a big, there's a big anniversary of the airport that we have. And invite you to look into that. We have the Animal Control Advisory Committee, the Arts Advisory Committee, the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Now, this one is, I think, a very important committee that a lot of people don't consider. But have you seen in Hot Springs where there'll be a sidewalk and then it stops and there'll be no sidewalk, and then a few blocks down that street the sidewalk starts back? Have you seen that? Well, what happens is somebody comes in and says, I want to put a restaurant here, or I want to build a store, whatever it is they want to build. And the city's ordinance requires them to put the sidewalk there. But they'll ask for an exception. Or if they say you have to put the sidewalk and they get their permit and they get the zoning they want, but they have to put they can appeal. And this doesn't go to the Board of Directors, it goes to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals. And they can ask them to give them an exception to not put the sidewalk there. And sometimes they threaten, well, we don't know if we can do it or not. But what I found was the realtors loaded up on this committee, and they wanted to make sure the deal went through smooth, and they would vote to give them an exception. And I had a gentleman that was on this committee, and he was always standing up for, we need the sidewalks there, and he was getting overruled by the realtors. So I don't have anything against realtors, but we need a balance. I don't think you want all, or the majority, you want a balance of representation from the city on these type committees. But that's an example that,
Excuse me, Karen.
yes.
And I've noticed that quite a bit. In my former life, I was pretty much aware of ADA. Does not ADA take precedence over that? Or
When they appeal, the way the law is now, it goes to this committee, and they can give an exception and waive it.
Over ADA?
They're not, legally, it says that ADA is still in place, but it's not being enforced.
So it's just going to take somebody suing them.
That's why I think this committee is so important, and that we need citizens on it and not just a lot of realtors.
How do you find out if there's an opening on these?
Well, that's why I listed all of these, and I attached a application. This is a printed application. There are applications online, but you can go ahead, if there's ones you're interested in, you can go ahead and apply for those, and when the opening comes up. But the city clerk maintains the registry of city where they need position. And
It's on the city website, too.
yeah, it's on the city website, but if you have specific questions about anyone, and I can tell you the Construction Trades Advisory Committee always has openings. It's never been full as long as I can remember.
Which one, Karen?
The Construction Trades Advisory Committee. The Civil Service Commission deals with the police and fire, and they when they have hiring or they want to change something, they'll go before the Civil Service Commission. The Community Development Advisory Committee is the committee that makes recommendation on how the CDBG grants the city receives will be spent or awarded. Like for Habitat for Humanity usually applies for money for infrastructure where they're going to be building. Some of these went into community organizations improvements. what we're seeing up on Park Avenue with the sidewalks and of the improvements that's been made up there in the infrastructure was from the CBDG grants. We've had some go to sidewalks. And Mr. Carnahan, the city engineer, is very, very good in looking at where he can get more money for sidewalks. We have a high number of pedestrians that are out and there's no sidewalks. I mean, or there'll be sidewalks and then these are people walking to work in wheelchairs. Yes, I see them every day.
Or the sidewalk's broken,
Yes.
and you can break your foot.
Yes, yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of, and kids are walking to school without sidewalk, people are in the streets. So, Mr. Carnahan has been very good in the streets programs, trying to find where they can also, when they're doing that, to do the sidewalks. All the sidewalks on Higdon Ferry was done by the highway department. That's part of their requirement because that is a state highway. So the city's responsible for the city streets. The state does that all. When they do this expansion from the bridge down to 290, you see some work going on there now. The city has, see, we have city utilities going out there. That's not in the city, but we got utilities. They're having to move all the utilities over before they can do the widening. But when they do the widening, they're supposed to have bike lane and the sidewalks like they did on Higdon Ferry all the way out to 290. And then the next step of that, the state is plans to do from 290 to the Hot Spring County Bridge. So, but we really need all of 7 widened, and hopefully in the future we'll have that money. But we need you to be involved on the city and these committees. I think, Ann, aren't you on the Parks and Trails?
No,
You were.
No, I was for a long time, and I'd like to speak to that. That is going to be an exciting committee because they're just now starting to finish up on the Greenway
Right.
down to the lake.
Right.
But, you know, where you were talking about getting water, there's 3 lakes up north of town.
Right.
And they'd like to develop
The Northwoods.
the North Woods as a biking area. And they'd like to actually develop this area, this whole area is for biking tourism. And believe me, my husband rode across the country on a bicycle, so there's a lot of money in, bicycle tourists are not poor people usually, and they spend money, they have to spend a night somewhere or two.
Right.
And they're a lot quieter.
And they're
than
quiet,
Harleys.
and they don't have
And they don't have
emissions.
emissions.
And, it would be a real good thing for this area to develop that. So that would be a good committee to serve on if you're interested in something like that, because there's a lot going on in the next few years.
Yeah, and the,
serve on more than one committee or commission?
now they have, you choose which one you want to be on.
One. Okay.
Also, just one more plug. So I live in the county, I know many of us do, but for those of our members who live in the city, I really encourage you to apply for one of the city commissions. It's a great way to begin to get involved. And so please, if you're watching this and you live in the city, give consideration to putting an application in for one of these commissions.
And I have more copies of this, and I'm going to leave with you that you can, people that weren't able to be here, so they can look at this, and if they want to fill out a paper application, or they can do one online. But we need more people involved. We need people that care about our community, and we need you. And when issues come up, we need you to come to the city board meetings and express your views. And it's so important to have the citizens' input, because if you don't hear from people and you just hear from people that are against something and it's something you're really for, if everyone that's for it is silent, how do the members of the board, if they just hear one side, how do they know that many people are interested in something?
Karen, I have another question for you. So I've never been to a city board meeting, And I don't get resort TV cable, I never have for my television. You mentioned that you can pick it up on live stream. Do you know where we go to do that?
You go to the city's website. I mean, I can get it on my phone.
Is it 12, channel 12?
Channel 12 on resort cable, but you can, if you can get internet, you can go to the City of Hot Springs website and stream it live on the nights of the meeting. And then they have archives of all the prior meetings. You can go watch prior meetings that are on there, and you can go to the website and click on the meeting you want to watch.
That's great, thank you.
And I would encourage you to do that. And usually on the website, the agenda and the information, the packet, it's called, that has all the information for the upcoming meeting is available on Friday before the Tuesday meeting. And you can look at that to see what's coming up and to see the things that you would want to maybe come and speak about, or bring a group. You know, if we have something coming up on ADA, then we need the people that's most impacted to come there and speak for that.
Well, and I'm an alternate on the Planning Commission, and I would like to say that they also have training programs that the public is always welcome to attend. And the training sessions, it's not every month, but we had one last month and not this month. But check the newspaper or check the website. And it's usually an hour beforehand. The last one we had, I think we were dealing with sidewalks, signs, those things that affect the Planning Commission. But that's a wonderful way to learn.
Yeah, signs is another hot issue. Because the sign code's supposed to be being rewritten. And there's been a lot of controversy on the signs, and usually it's car dealerships that get, one has something more than another one. But
You're talking about Planning Commission?
Yes.
I have a question. On the west side of the bridge that goes over Lake Hamilton Airport Road, they're building Bubba's Brews. How did that, was the Planning Commission involved in that? Was the city involved in that? And how did they get that passed? I mean, how did they get permission to build that there?
I don't think that's in the city limits.
It was the Planning Commission?
Planning Department.
Department.
The Planning Department administers or is staff to the Planning Commission. They're the ones who talk with the developer or the applicant. And they're the ones who also make recommendations to the Planning Commission. From the Planning Commission, then it goes to the city board. And usually the city board has final say-so on some things. I'm not familiar with this one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Glad you brought that up. That is
But
an
I don't know
eyesore.
that that's in the city limits.
It might not be. It's in that
Yes, it
wet-
is.
Yeah, it's in
The
each
city
example.
limits goes to the lake.
What,
To the lake.
no, it doesn't, not everywhere, but it does go along that corridor
Right.
of Airport Road, both sides, so it's probably in the city.
I'm sure it's in the city, yeah.
And
But
it is
Kathy
a real eyesore.
is the department
It's
head.
going to be a dangerous place too, with people that have been
Coming
drinking,
in and
going
out.
in and out of there in
Oh, yeah.
boats. It's gonna be horrible.
When you come out, you're gonna only be able to turn right. And we're gonna all read about
An
the
accident.
first death.
Yeah.
And the other one was the
Near
urban
future.
forestry, someone had mentioned that. But then that did have an opening too, and that, I think that's an important.
But we don't have an urban forester anymore. They fired him, I think. I mean, they ran out of money or something.
Yeah, they ran out of funding, but they did have a position posted for urban forestry.
Really?
Yeah, they'd been working, trying to get someone back into that position, but I don't I don't know if it's as beefed up as it was before. But all of these are very important, and we need citizens' participation. And that's how we need more. This is real grassroots, and we need people involved. Like the Planning Commission is another very important, because usually the board follows the Planning Commission's recommendation, and that's where all zoning changes come in. And this can be controversial too, because I've had residents that did not want certain zoning codes, and because they can ask for a code, the code stays with the land. So if that owner's putting in a quiet business, but they're asking for a change to a code that would allow a lot of other type businesses, they may be asking for the wrong code, because that causes the residential area to be concerned if it's going to allow a nightclub to be there and it's by them, and it might be a quiet business now, you know, just a small store or a salon or something like that. Then they don't have to ask for a code that when they sold the property in the future, that it could become something else that would not fit into that neighborhood. And that is something that and the Planning Commission also, when they're asked, they'll say you have to have sidewalks there. Then if they appeal it, that's why that other committee is so important, because that doesn't go to the city board for appeal. Anything the Planning Commission rules on, they can appeal to the city board. And that has happened, but usually, unless it's something very unique, they usually follow the recommendations of the Planning Commission. So I would ask you to please look at these. I did want to bring out something in this last session. I still keep up with the Arkansas Municipal League. Has a magazine every month, and it's online. You could look at it yourselves. But some bills that came out of the legislative session that impact cities. Act 393 by Senator Sample increased the historic rehabilitation income tax credits. And that's important for us because of seeking development and redevelopment into the city of Hot Springs. It becomes more attractive when they can get these additional tax credits. So it helps developers or business people to put more money in redeveloping those historic buildings. But there was some bills that the Municipal League opposed that did become law, and one was a water provider legislative task force. It was a bill by Senator Clark, and he had two bills. One provided a state law directing local water policies. That failed, but the one asking for a task force passed, and there's to be a task force from the legislator appointed, and they would look at all the differences in local water services and needs and develop recommendations. So those were some that were impactful to Hot Springs. Some of the others that were passed or failed didn't impact us as specifically.
You know, the other thing that impacts us a little bit, talking about these committees and boards that people can serve on, there seem to be a small number of people who like to harass the city. I read in the paper the other day about how they want thousands of pages.
10,000.
Of information, which is causing city employees to have to stop what they're doing and run papers off. I haven't ever seen one of these people by name on any of these boards and commissions doing positive things to help the city. So, but often you find them outside the library with a petition in their hand. If you're a city resident and you signed that petition without thinking what it means, and we have to have an election, it could cost all of us who live in the city something like between $20,000 and $25,000 for one of those special elections. So before you sign anyone's petition, stop yourself and say, I've got to call up somebody like my city director and find out what this means. Because I've seen so many of them out here and people just signing, yes, sign. But really what it does is it ends us costing us elections and attorney fees. And sometimes it's stuff that isn't good for the city.
So I'll just, taking more time than I intended to, I'm sorry. But there is a page in here too, it's number 9 down at the bottom, but it says key facts about Arkansas infrastructure, and you can just see, this is within Arkansas, our infrastructure needs, and we have these here in Hot Springs too. So you can see we have quite a bit, and wastewater is one of the big ones in infrastructure needs, roads. One of the things I hear a lot about is our streets. We definitely need more. We've got needs of $6.1 billion for drinking water infrastructure. And we've got infrastructure needs here in Hot Springs. In the bridges, across Arkansas, that we've got 880 bridges that have deficits.
What was your figure again? 6.1?
Billion.
That's what I was like, did I hear that right?
That's for Arkansas.
Oh, okay.
Not just Hot Springs, but ours is a big for Hot Springs, a big number too. We don't have the final numbers yet. That's being developed, but it's going to be a big number. But this page shows you the needs of infrastructure. So the roads needs is averages about $500 per year per motorist. I thought that was interesting. And then I added some of the history of Hot Springs, and you can see some of that just for your information. I have another handout I wanted to give you on the city services guide. And this has the numbers that you can call. It's got who to call for questions in those areas and locations and.
To that point, I had a question. Sorry, if you're concerned about getting a light put in a dangerous intersection, is that under street division or transportation or utilities?
Depends on who owns the street.
Yeah, if it's on a city street, you can. They will all pass it to the right person, but the street department would pass it to the one that you need.
There's this action line.
Because, the action line passes it to the right department. But you could call the city manager even about it, or the deputy or assistant. I usually like to talk to Mr. Carnahan because he's he's the city engineer and he's very knowledgeable about that type of thing for all of the departments.
Action line is good. I've gotten good results.
Yeah, they'll pass it
rather quickly.
Yeah, they worked on that customer service for that.
Well, they're doing a good job.
So,
Where's Parks and Trails?
Karen, do they give
Jean.
these to realtors have these? Do they give these to new homeowners at closing or whatever?
they're available for them. I don't know if they do or not.
I've never seen this ever. This is great.
These are usually published every 2 years. So this was the newest one. And I think it's got good information for the, Kathy Selman, here is her number. That's the number you asked about the building that
Okay, good.
this is the person to check with right there. Is her.
Thank you, I sure.
And Parks and Trails, you asked about that. That's here with Gene Wallace.
Yeah, I see it now.
And so keep this as a reference, and it's got, I think, good information in it.
What page are you?
Thank you, Karen.
If I do get back on the city board, I will reinstitute my public meetings. And I have public information meetings, and that's a public meeting. It's not just for District 5. We have it open to anyone, and everyone would be welcome. And we have at each meeting a different topic pertinent to what's going on into the city for information, and hopefully about more recycling and some other things that we can do. Again, I thank everybody, and I really hope that all of you can be involved in some way.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.